Hello, and welcome to Regrets I've Had a Few. I'm Paul Hunter, Artistic Director of Told by an Idiot, and this is a podcast where I talk to friends and colleagues delving into what made them the person they are today.
Hello, and welcome. My guests this month are three extraordinary designers. What connects them all is that they've all been recipients of the Naomi Wilkinson Award, and they are forging a unique visual path which I, for one, will be continue to follow with interest. Welcome Sonya Smullen, Lulu Tam, and Ioana Curelea. Hello, everybody, friends. Thank you so much for popping in. We were chatting pre the recording about what would the word be for a group of designers. So I will encourage our listeners to come up with a term. I don't have one. Anyway, obviously, we're going to talk about the Naomi Wilkinson Award, which does link you in some way. So we'll touch on that later, and the work that we've done all together with Tom, Idiot, and you. But I'd like to start with something which is a bit different to my normal questions. Is obviously you come from three very different places, and my question really to kick off was, how do you feel your place of birth has shaped your visual imagination? And I'm going to go to Lulu first. Hello, Lulu. What about that question?
Hello, hi, thank you. Yeah, thanks for giving me the first question to answer. Yes, I mean, to be honest, like it's different from other people who have a visual art or artistic backgrounds. I didn't come across as art when I was little. Like I haven't went to a theater to see a play when I was a little. The first theater performance that I saw is when I was doing my BA study when I was helping design the show. So I think my background is very different, and I think I only started to study art when I was in high school, and then kind of like go into the training of fine arts, and then go to my BA study. And I think the first ever theatre production or art or exhibitions that I ever come across is actually contemporary art, and I think because I haven't really seen like really classical or like theatre or art, the opening for my art practice is kind of contemporary and avant-garde. So that really shaped my practice. Is when I was seeing things, I always want to see things in a particular way. So I guess that's the influence. But yeah, nobody in my family was doing arts or anything related. So I'm kind of the lonely wolf.
That's very interesting as well, that your experience of seeing theatre happened relatively late. That's quite a
Yeah.
interesting notion.
Yeah.
Ioana, how about you?
Unlike Lulu, I did have contact with art very early on. So I'm classically trained in fine art. And I wasn't really interested in theater beyond. Romania has a really rich culture of puppet theater. And I remember going to these shows with my mom, and it was just pure magic. And then progressively got interested in other things and more political things. And I think coming to the UK with this sort of background in very structured fine art where, they're trying to make you into a mini version of themselves, and then having the opening to what experimental theater is and what device theater is. And I think what really solidified it for me was going to see Deviates John, I think at the Barbican. And it was one of the first performances I've seen. And I cried in the theater, and I don't cry in public ever. And it was just, it's a bit wanky, but it was quite transformative for me. And I was sat there and I was like, this is what I want to do.
That's a really, we will come, I want to talk about influence later on, but that's very interesting. I also think, should you ever write your memoirs, that's a very good title. I cried in the theatre and I never cry in public. It's a very good, you should use that if you do. Sonya, how did Glasgow, Scotland and everything shape your visual imagination?
Well, I think the city's kind of full of interesting characters and people. I think the people bring that kind of strange quality of absurdity that you can find in theatre. But I didn't. I'm kind of similar to Lulu. Like, I wasn't really going to the theatre much at all. I actually studied music, so I went to music school, and I did violin and piano. And I remember sitting in the music history lesson, and we once, like, the first sort of interaction to live performance in theatre was like sitting watching Wagner's Ring Cycle, and I thought this. It was a YouTube video, and I thought, what is going on that set? Like, it looks shit. And I was kind of really intrigued at the fact that this music was paired with this opera set design. And that was kind of the first sort of initial interaction with theatre and live performance, what that could be. And I think that led me to think about the spaces in Glasgow and how they could transform.
Interesting. So I've just been yesterday reading some short stories about Alistair Gray, because I love his writing, and particularly Lanark, which is obviously a brilliant novel. But the way he combines illustration and literature is so amazing. I suppose,
Do you know, it's really funny. It was my birthday recently. My mum bought me the book Lanark.
Ah,
Yeah, so I'm reading it now.
where
Yeah.
astonishing thing, and you're right, Glasgow is an extraordinary city full of extraordinary things. If I may, I might just pop back to Ioana, because you talked about puppetry in Romania, and having taken Told by an Idiot there on 2 or 3 occasions. I've always loved visiting and touring in Romania. Do you have a memory of a very early show that your mother took you to, a puppet show? Can you remember anything from when you were quite little, or not, and what effect it had on you?
Yeah, it was actually Romanian folk stories that were staged, and it was almost like a series of sketches intertwined, made into one big narrative. And I think one of the things that really stood out for me was just the magic and the craft of the puppets. And even though they didn't look human, they almost felt more human to me as, like a 4-year-old, compared to a lot of the grown-ups I was seeing around me. And I think having that realization really early on really made me think about things differently as well, in terms of when I was drawing, at a very basic level at that age, and how I was seeing things.
Ah, that's interesting. That's the impact something had as to how you then, even at a young age, how you're then reimagining something for yourself. That's very interesting. So you have all, very different beginnings and ways into. Uh, Lulu, at what point you talk about not growing up in a world where theatre was something that was happening or around you, but at what point did you start to feel, this is something I'd like to do, and I'd like to study it, and how did that happen, and then how did you end up where you did study all of what was was there a key moment, or was it gradual?
Yeah, I think there's a key moment, and then they gradually kind of develop. Because when I kind of like going to study in my BA, I kind of like just blindly choose a subject is like film, TV, and stage design. And at the second year, we can actually choose which direction that we want to go. So set is kind of what the direction that I went, and then there was like a scenography studio, particularly studied well and practice a lot of I have a lot of practice in theatre, and that's when I started the second year of my undergraduate study, and then that's how everything kind of like gradually went. And then after 3 years of studying, I really want to kind of like further continue my kind of study, particularly in scenography and theatre design. Yeah, that's kind of how
Right. Interesting. What about you, Sonia? At what point? I always assume when I think of the three of you, when I first encountered you, obviously in the workshops for the award, we'll come to Naomi Wilkinson Award shortly, but watching you create and play, in a sense, which is what we do at Told by an Idiot, and then obviously collaborating with you, I have an image of you all even maybe I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but making things from quite an early age in some shape or form. So, Sonya, when did you start to think, oh, this is something I might want to do, and how did you then kind of pursue the idea of training, and where you would then wanted to go?
I think it was, you know, when, like, to be honest, I think you choose at a really young age, especially in the UK, how what you're meant to study, and I think there's this immense pressure of figuring out at the age of 16 what the hell I was going to do. And I think I kind of had this mind map that I created of all the things that I liked. And initially I thought it was going to be costume. And then I had this like image in my head of sitting in the room, just like in a sweatshop on my own, making like, oh, like, I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Um, and then I think videography was another idea. And then I thought, no, too tech heavy. But I've always loved stop motion animation. So I think it was to do with playing with scaled miniature things and how that could move forward. And it's the same thing like scenography. I didn't even know it existed in terms of theatre. So I think it was just finding that out and seeing that there was a course in that and thinking, okay, I'm gonna try it, see how it is.
Excellent. Obviously, for you guys who've worked with Todd Bennett and collaborated with me on 3 very different shows, which we'll talk about, the connection sometimes between direction and design, we'll come to that in a second, but does it ever feel that the notion of designing for the stage or whatever that is, as a thing, does it ever feel quite solitary? Because I'm curious sometimes. Is obviously I meet you and I meet designers in usually a very creative collaboration and conversation, but I'm also conscious that you spend a lot of time on your own. How does that feel? Like I say, does it feel quite solitary sometimes?
Um, I don't particularly find it solitary because I have very slowly moved into very community-based theater and very collaborative.
Mm.
So the time I'm actually spending on my own doing the research and the model making and all those like itty-bitty small technical things is much less than the time I actually spend with other creative people in the room. Um, but I might be saying that because I'm also solitary as a person. So I'm not,
But you're comfortable with solitude.
I am indeed.
Yeah. Chapter 1 of your book, of course, comfortable with solitude.
Leave me alone.
Leave me as a good title. Lulu, how about you? Does it ever feel solitary or?
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. I think it's a process of when you are designing or researching or creating some visuals, making models, you're in this solitary zone, like you were doing this on yourself, on yourself. But then is the moment of having this discussion, that the sharing is the kind of collective discussion. So it's kind of like move out the box and move in the box all the time. Like you just have to come back all the time. But I quite enjoy the kind of like the energy between them.
Ah, that's it. Yes. And it's interesting you say to go from quite focused solo work to suddenly being certainly in idiot rooms, which can be quite wild and quite anarchic, to a kind of hopefully controlled chaos. So I think the three of you do that, certainly in my experience, very, very well to do that. Let's come to the Naomi Wilkinson Award. For listeners, Naomi Wilkinson was a wonderful designer that we met, as told me, at Haley and I think about 5 or 6 shows into our life as a company. And Naomi's work was recommended to us by another director, and we met with her. And at that point, pre stuff being done on computer, she brought her portfolio to a cafe in Soho, and Haley and I looked at it and went, "Wow, this is fantastic!" And then Naomi went on to design for us across 10 years. And I've said this to you, but she very much shaped our visual aesthetic and how things look and not how they move and all of that. Sadly, she died, and then we set up something that we wanted to remember her, a legacy, and we wanted that to be a real practical living legacy for designers, young female designers. And the prize is to design a show. The downside is you have to collaborate with me as the director, but we're not going to touch on that at the moment. Um, and obviously, the three of you entered and won it, and it is a prize to win. And I'm just curious as to A, how you first heard about the award, and B, what made you apply. Sonya.
I've actually first heard of the award through one of the technicians at my uni, Tyson. He said, you should check out this award. It sounds up your street." Because I was talking about site-specific design and devised theatre and wanting to get into that. And he knew you guys, and I thought, oh, right, great. So did a bit of research, and it was great.
Oh, well, thank you. I remember Tyson very much. So thank you, Tyson, for recommending that to you. Lulu, how did you hear about it? What made you apply?
Yeah, well, not that embarrassed, Sonia, because I couldn't even remember how I answered. Because I think at that time, because basically my professional practice is when I'm busy, I don't look for work.
Mhm.
And when I think that I need to deal with more projects, I started looking something. And I think I constantly would Google like state design prize or state design award, something like that, and think it just pop up like on Google.
Well, I'm very glad it popped up, Lulu. I'm very glad. Ioana?
So I was completely oblivious to the outside world and had no idea I was entered in this competition by Michael
Vale. Yeah.
Vale, the legend, the man himself. And I just got an email from Jen asking for a portfolio, and I was like, "Oh, what is this?" And I just sent my portfolio, not expecting to hear back really.
Well, you certainly did hear back, and you touched on something there that's very important to us, which is the notion of how, as a company, we try to connect with uh, collaborators across all ages, all demographics, all of that. Particularly the award looking to support a younger visual imagination, and we're always interested in trying to work with a more experienced designer. How did you find that notion of having, I suppose, mentoring in some way during the award? Was that useful? Was it something you found was nice to have a slightly separate sounding board?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just for me, I mean, in any junket I get, I wish I had a mentor just to sort of check in and see, am I doing this right? Because there's something with every project, with the different people that you work with, it's almost like a new job. It's a new kind of way of working, and I think it's understanding the dynamic of that. And I think with Angela, it was great to just be able to chat about our different processes and how she would have done something differently, or to her this is an interesting way. It's almost it's like a give and take. I'm giving her something and she's giving me something, and it's really useful in that sense.
But I suppose it's also interesting, isn't it? Because, like you say, it's a kind of dialogue, and I totally agree with what you said at the beginning. I unofficially, and they don't know they're my mentors, but there are people in life that are very much my mentors, and and remain so. Will always remain so. People like Joss Subin and John Wright, who founded the company, and those dialogues and conversations, I think, are crucial, vital. I think. As it moves forward. Now, you each obviously did three very different shows and obviously as winners of the award, you were then presented with an idea that you then had to design. Um, and they were very different as well in form. Obviously, Ioana, you designed brilliantly for us Charlie and Stan, a device piece about the early life of Charlie Chaplin and Stan Laurel. Lulu, you did our reinvention of a 1960s script called The Killing of Sister George. And Sonia, you've just done our adaptation of a children's picture book called How Does Santa Go Down the Chimney? So obviously, on paper, very eclectic. And we were very keen with the award that each time we give the award, it's to something in form that feels very different as well. I suppose my question is, you're very different designers, of course you are, but you all kind of responded. If I think back on it, I was thinking about this morning, to the provocation of what those things were. in a very, very obviously interesting way and kind of reinvented that. Could you remember? I was thinking about very early conversations with the three of you, but can you remember your first kind of reaction to the thing you were going to design? Because I think very deliberately, as part of the award, we don't announce what the thing is because we don't want people to become obsessed with this idea of what they might design, if that makes sense. It was only later on that we said to you, oh, this is what you're going to do. So what was your first, for instance, Lulu, what was your first response to the play, The Killing of Sister George?
Yeah, I think well, that's a really good one because that's kind of like a more test based
Mhm.
and kind of recreation of the 60s. Then it kind of like you have to go into that period quite a lot with tons of research. And then what I really like is the conversation at the beginning where we have like during the interview,
Mhm.
we were actually asked to do a visual
Yeah.
of that play. And I think the moment of when you were saying the Foley idea
Mhm.
with reference with what I read in the script is really kind of like it's just like click together. And I think that's the moment that, oh, this is really interesting, this is really exciting. And I think particularly later in when they go to the R&D, I really enjoy the process of how you would kind of did like sweetly in the space all together with the actors. And yeah,
That's interesting, of course. So sometimes there is one key thing, isn't it? The Foley was obviously in that place quite crucial because the central character is a radio performer in a radio show. So playing with that idea, I can see why. Iwana, obviously, in a sense, of the three awards we've given, yours probably had the least to go on. I remember obviously saying to you, I don't. This isn't a documentary about. I want it to delve into the past, the future, and the world of the imagination. And I remember saying to you, the only thing I do know is I want it to take place on this ship because they did sail in reality from Southampton to New York. And I thought the ship and the journey obviously works as both something quite literal and then more as a metaphor. And I remember you coming back very early on in the process to show me some early ideas. And you talked about this idea, which I really liked, which then carried all the way through, was the idea of a ship that's been lying at the bottom of the ocean and has been dragged back up. And I loved that idea, which then we ran with. What made, can you, if you can remember, what made you land on something like that after we chatted quite early on?
Um, I think because my instinct was also, this isn't a documentary, this isn't a piece of film necessarily, even though it has quite cinematic moments, brilliantly crafted by our creative team. Um, I think it was very much instinctual and very much sort of created around the myth and memories. Um, and sort of seeing the sketches within the show as, is it a memory? Is this something that happened? Is this something reimagined? Um, and a sunken ship, sort of the myth of the sunken ship, just felt really appropriate for that.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Sonia, we've only just finished working, obviously, and the show continues. One thing I really loved and continue to love was the conversations we had around influences, because on one level, the book is very much a children's picture book. It's a beautiful book the way it's designed, and I love what the book is about in a slightly existential way. But I loved our conversations around influence, and sometimes influences that you might think that's a weird influence to have on this, bring to this children's picture book. And I'm going to kind of, as we come towards the end of this lovely discussion, I'm probably going to ask this to the two of you as well, but I'll start with Sonia. I'm sure there's many, many, many influences on your work, whatever it is that you're doing. But could you talk about, it could be something, could be a film, could be an artist. Is there something that remains very central as an influence to how you see theatre and design?
In general? And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything? Oh, I think um for me I'm a film gal. So Mr. Gondry has always been
Yeah.
his animations. Monty Python is a classic one. I mean, it's clear in the book. I think that's something that's always being carried through, but also painters. I mean, for this show in particular, I remember just seeing Peter Bruegel in the sort of the scene of the landscape. Yeah, I think it changes. I try not to have. There is always going to be a reoccurring influence just because I am a person who carries things onto one project to another, but I try to change it up and keep it diverse.
Well, I like the fact that the two. This is, again feels very Told by an Idiot, that you can have influences that, that on paper feel wildly apart. So from Bruegel to Michel Gondry, I like that our work accommodates that very wide reference of influence like yours does. Ioana?
I think similarly to Sonya, heavily influenced by film as well. David Lynch will forever live in my heart.
Indeed.
And I think, again, because I sort of had the education of it, I'm very fond of especially grotesque paintings, I think, and Otto Dix and
Yeah.
Munch and Egon Schiele. And there's a lot of that influence in how I design the costumes as well.
I can see that. I can see that very clearly in Charlie and Stan. Very clearly. For sure, yeah.
So yeah, but I think one other influence, which I think since I've started teaching has become, I think, stronger, is other people's ideas and work, and how working in a community impacts that in a more ritualistic sense as well. And sort of how we perceive that, as a collaborative practice, and the influence, just those people can have on your work.
Excellent. Excellent. I get that. Lulu, influences?
Yeah, so I came across with Roman Paslucci before I came to the UK to study, and that director's and also a visual artist, like theatre designer, has been constantly an influence. I think it's just like the way he create the project, create the experience for the audience, constantly challenging the audience, like particularly using loads of like using babies, children, ritual animals, all of that. So sometimes even horrified audience. So I think that kind of concept constantly kind of made me thinking when I was doing things like I want to create new experience for the audience and to create new work. Yeah, that's kind of my passion.
No,
Yeah.
I see what you mean, and I always feel it like with it, it's like all of life is presented in some way, as you say, sometimes quite dark and grotesque, and sometimes comic as well. So, no, I get exactly what you mean, guys. It's been really lovely chatting to you. It's been lovely to see you all together. You are brilliant designers, and it's been great to get an insight into how you see things, and I think listeners will be very intrigued by, as I said, you don't always get a flavor of where design starts or what begins it or what ignites it. So thank you very, very much, and I will see you all very soon.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having us.
Dear listeners, if you've enjoyed this idiot podcast, please spread the word